Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday to, well, anyone in Eastern Standard Time, or Central, I suppose, in Mountain. Just doing an early morning show. I'm going to complete the review of this video that I started from Tom Rabbit's channel. So I wasn't planning initially on doing a two-parter on this, but given the size of it and everything that's going on in it, that's what happened. So hopefully I can get through it with just two parts. Thanks for everybody that's here, everybody that's shown up live. There's probably well, I don't know how many people are actually streaming right now. Carlton Winston is doing his usual 10 a.m. thing. He's doing another breakdown of some D-Roy Cruz stuff. So if anyone's interested, he is also live. I wish I could find a better time to do these, but kind of bright and early on Saturday mornings is a good time for me to get these because I usually disappear for the rest of the weekend. Anyway, that being said, it's a nice day. It's sunny out, so I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. I'm going to try not to rush it. But sun is shining, tea is hot and heavily caffeinated, so should be good to go. Let's see. Let's check in with the live chat. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I think I've said hi to everybody so far, except for Warren. He's also correct to put his claim. Yep, good to see you. Janaya DeMarco, nice to have you here. Victory till the end, morning. I hope you're doing well because I am not. Well, that's not good, Victory. Sorry to hear that. I hope everything will be okay, or is okay now. Let's see, Josephus Rivero, good to see you. Yeah, I'm going to get right back into this just to kind of set up the context. There was a part one, so if you haven't seen that, you probably ought to watch that. Otherwise, this will make less sense. But maybe if you want to skip ahead, I was not able to get to the point where JRobin kind of loses it, even though that's kind of what I advertised with that first video. Now that I'm getting into the second half of this, actually, I don't even think I made it halfway. Getting into this is where things start kind of ramping up, and JRobin kind of, it just gets kind of tired. To remind anybody, in case they haven't seen the first one, don't want to go back and review it, they had been talking quite a bit this particular day, and this was at least the second session that I'm aware of after a lot of Clubhouse back and forths. Roger had been in one of the Clubhouse rooms that JRobin's usually in and was in there and talked to him, and then Darth showed up and Darth kicked him out. Roger was invited on over here over at Atheism, or he might be part of this particular club. Jeff, who's visible on the screen, he was running that. And then JRobin followed him over, and they begin this conversation again. I don't think at the end of this, I haven't seen the tail end of this. At least I don't think I have. I don't think Darth follows them in after this. I think this is just under the two of them. I think JRobin probably quits at some point, and then there might be a discussion with somebody else later on. But we'll see where that gets to. I've rewound this back just a couple of minutes because Roger, where I'd left off, Roger had kind of gotten into a couple of different arguments that he said he would use as possible falsifiers or possible rebuttals to what JRobin was kind of putting forward. And so I've rewound it just a minute and a half or so back into that so that I can kind of get that part out again, because Roger's talking about something that I've heard of but I'm not entirely familiar with. But he's going to attempt to lay this out to JRobin. I don't know how familiar JRobin is with this point that Roger's making, but will JRobin ask clarifying questions and seek to get educated on whatever it is Roger's putting down? Probably not. So, again, hello to the chat, and thanks everybody for showing up. Let me know if there's any audio issues going on. I think I've got my volume. People had been complaining about things coming across kind of quiet. I think I've got those levels kind of sorted, so if everything sounds good, great. If not, give a yell in the live chat. All right. Okay, we're going to fire this up, and here we go. This is going to jump right in with Roger kind of going into one of several arguments that he's tried to lay out in this one. Let's see if even, if JRobin even gives him the opportunity to really lay it out completely.
That I'm trying to say is that there's this additional argument that I think defeats your argument, which is the argument from Conciliation with respect to pure disagreement. And let me lay that out. So in the epistemology of pure disagreement, there's generally a phenomenon where two people that are of cognitive and evidential parity get into a disagreement with one another. They observe a particular phenomenon. So let's say they're watching a horse race, and you think horse A won and I think horse B won. We have the same exact eyesight. We are sitting right next to each other. We have all the same evidence, all the same facts. Okay. Now, in this kind of situation, the fact that you think that horse won is evidence of the fact that I might be wrong. But the fact that I think that this horse won is evidence of the fact that you might be wrong. Okay. And so in these kinds of instances, epistemically speaking, it's a very viable position to say, we should just suspend judgment about who's right in this kind of situation because we have this higher order evidence. Now, generally speaking, and this is a very serious view in the academic literature, when we come across instances of pure disagreement, so I'm listening to the atheist, they're making some arguments. I'm listening to the theist, they're making some arguments. I think both are persuasive. And because they symmetrically pull in opposite directions and they're epistemic peers with one another, absent some ultimate adjudicating, like instant replay thing, which we don't have in a lot of cases in philosophical arguments, the most rational position is to split the difference, a la David Christensen in his paper in 2007. This is something that is very common in academic epistemology. You could hold to a steadfast position, although there are issues with steadfastness because it could very much easily lead to dogmatism. And what I'm basically saying is that I think that agnosticism is a viable position because I could come to it through the conciliation argument for pure disagreement. I know that you were incurious about this argument previously, but I'm curious to see if you have any reply to the argument that I put hitherto. I felt as though I dealt with your argument previously. I mean, you abandoned 17 arguments, all of which I refuted, to then rely on this new one that seems to just collapse back into an old problem. If you want to shout loudly in order to compensate for the fact that your points are philosophically vacuous, then go ahead and do so. But I think that people see what you're doing.
Okay, so yeah, none of that was a response to what I asked you. None of that was a response to the question, and no.
Of course not. Right out of the gate. Of course. No. He's just going to reject that whole thing. Well, that wasn't a response to what I asked you. Pretty sure it probably was. Benghazi, how long until you were sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends? Yeah, that's a good. I can't wait for the day that I'm in a position where I'm like shilling for a freemium game. God, I hope it's not that. I think I'd rather shill for like one of those toilet paper subscription services or something like that. I just saw an ad for one of those a couple of days ago. I think they were doing like an Earth Day special. I was like, huh, all right. Jody, thank you for filling the ennui of Saturday morning coffee consumption. Yeah, I might be adding to the ennui for everyone's coffee consumption, Jody. So, yeah, I apologize for that. Let's see here. So JRobin is automatically kind of dismissing this. He's saying that whatever that Roger's explanation here, getting into that argument, getting into that explanation, which I thought was pretty helpful, especially when he's trying to. But it's not going to be helpful for JRobin, right? Because he's already citing things. Roger was talking about things about like academic, sort of the academic, not consensus. He didn't use that word, but that's kind of the point of that. This is what a lot of trained epistemologists would hold to. They wouldn't say that agnosticism is just this sort of like necessarily incoherent position, which seems to be kind of where JRobin is going with this. And JRobin is now, hopefully he's going to repeat whatever his question was. I'm really kind of curious as to how he decided that, and everything that Roger just said there, none of it counts as a response to what he asked.
You have not ever refuted the position that you can't be neutral, that you're not going to be affirming a proposition as to whether or not God exists. That is what I'm taking neutrality to mean, that you're neither affirming nor denying a proposition. And that would be the case because you are actively holding, everyone is who's predicating, they're going to be holding to some sort of model of reality, some sort of metaphysical framework as it's been.
See, that's again more that shift, right? If you're predicating, right? If you're using facts, right? I love it when they say invoking facts because it's kind of a fraught word to use for this kind of stuff. But if you're going to be talking about that, or you're inclined to think that there is a God, or inclined to think that there isn't a God, or whatever, that you are committed to a worldview and all of its entailments. The agnostic position is, yeah, that could be the case, but I'm not convinced of what that actual worldview is. And so there are options, right? Even if there's just two options, even if the agnostic is just to accept, like, okay, there's either a God worldview and a not God worldview. There are two realities possible. One where there is a necessary being that created all of reality, or one where that being isn't there, right? Now that doesn't mean it couldn't be something else supernatural going on or whatever, but just that basic dichotomy, that God either it does exist or it does not. A person can have an agnostic position and say, this is the question that I've asked Darth, I've asked these guys this before. It doesn't follow for me. Like it could be the case that when I make these statements, that the entailment is that it entails a reality that is built upon a foundation of a creator being. That could be the case, but that doesn't change whether or not I'm agnostic about that reality, right? Uh, Especially if you don't have a conclusive explanation one way or the other. You have a possible explanation. There are other possible explanations. Now, JRobin believes that his possible explanation is more likely, right? Now, he's going to argue that it's necessary, but he can't demonstrate that. He could try dialing back the language and say it's either more probable or it's more rational or it's more coherent, and then he can lay out reasons as to why he believes that's the case, and maybe they work. But he doesn't have a complete, definitive, conclusive argument that demonstrates, incontrovertibly, this is the reality of that. Okay, then you go from there. So until then, a person can entertain multiple options, epistemologically. How that works, that doesn't change whether or not, like, if they could be quote unquote invoking facts, and that could imply that that's the entailment that's coming from a world necessarily created by this being, but that doesn't change their belief stance. So
defined here, and if that's the case, then it's just going to entail either that God does exist, or in virtue of the one that they do hold to, right, this is not God, which would be the case that God does not exist in their paradigm. Okay, their claims to agnosticism, however, practical they may want to say that it is in this context, however reasonable they may want to say it is in this context, that is irrelevant. Okay, their agnosticism is not tenable when it is being put in the context that it should be in.
Okay.
Is that we're talking about it in the frame of
No, that still doesn't make any sense, because he's still confusing. I think he's still confusing what people can know and what they do know with what actually is knowable and what really is there. This is still, to me, just a conflation of epistemology and ontology. Also, welcome to Clubhouse Debates. Grandicius, welcome. Let's see here. Looks like there's a little bit of an argument going on in there with Warren. This one is kind of weird. Also, welcome, Pinward. Nice to see you. Because otherwise, all claims to intelligibility are just arbitrary. If you don't understand the argument, maybe you should listen to more Darth videos. I don't think that's a healthy recommendation for anybody, but I don't understand that. Why would claims to intelligibility all just be arbitrary? If what? I think probably earlier on, maybe you got into that a little bit. Well, it's probably in there somewhere. The whole idea is that the Christian God is the necessary precondition of intelligibility. It's a question of ontology and epistemology, not theology. Yeah, maybe, but the issue behind this is what follows from that, right? Because the implication is, if there's no God, there's no intelligibility. No, if there's no God, there's no nothing, right? The reason that there is anything is because there's a God, and the reason that it's intelligible to us is because of God too. So frequently the rug that's attempted to be pulled out from non-believers is that, but if there's no God, you can't say anything about reality around you, and because you have a non-God worldview, it follows from that none of this stuff should make sense. That doesn't make sense, and that doesn't follow from that position, right? And again, that's not an internal critique, right? If the individual in question has a worldview in which their metaphysical foundation is something like in Roger's case, Platonism, I don't know how that argument exists, other than you just don't like what it is that is you don't like the necessary precondition. Right. It can't be Platonic forms because preferences. It has to be a God, and specifically has to be a Christian God. All right, fine. But it's obviously the case within Christian theology that there are people who can either reject that God, depending on their type of Christianity, or can disobey that God or whatever. They can be in the wrong about what they think they know about that God. So that's their epistemology. The notion that somebody doubts that or whatever, it obviously doesn't lead to that breaking down. The strength of a precept argument can just be, look, and this used to be the case. It wasn't this idea that, look, you can't be right because you don't acknowledge God. The claim was, look, we both assert things about the world around us. We both believe in certain axiomatic things, like kind of the cogito, the idea of denying oneself is sort of affirming oneself, shit like that. The law of identity, the law of excluded middle, these kinds of things. The trick was that the Christians could ground it. They could account for where that came from, and a non-believer couldn't. They just had to assume those things axiomatically, but then didn't have a grounding for it. That was problematic. But the weird thing that happened later on was that enough of these guys, kind of the enthusiasts, started running with the argument and wanted to, I think, jack up the stakes a little bit. And then they started turning into, if you don't acknowledge that, then that means that, that entails you can't be right about anything. That doesn't follow. And the original precept argument doesn't make that claim either. Everyone has these same things. We all have access to the same information. The difference between the Christian position and the non-position is simply that the Christians can account for those origins, right? Which is the initial mistake. That was the one that like Floyd F.P. would argue with Darth Dawkins about. When they started saying like, well, these axioms can be grounded, they were no longer talking about axioms. They turned those axioms into something else. They turned them into something contingent, when philosophically they were meant to be non-contingent. So that's where some initial disagreements happened. But then for whatever reason, it turned into whatever JRobin is attempting to weaponize. This has become sort of the style, is to just try to tell people, well, if you deny God, then you can't be right about anything. That does not follow from the original precept argument. It really doesn't.
The fact that you are invoking facts about X, Y, Z. Okay.
Right.
So let me put forward the modus ponens.
And so I think JRobin just wrapped it up essentially with the same thing again. Like, oh, if you're invoking facts, which is a stupid thing, you state a fact about the world around you. That fact is only a fact because God allows it. Cool. What does my belief state have to do with whether or not that claim is true? You and I both presupposed reality. We both presupposed facts. We both presupposed the intelligibility of facts, which are statements about actual states of affairs, in a reality we both presuppose to be real. There's a lot of presupposition going on. The difference between the Christian and the non-Christian, or the believer and non-believer, if you want to make it more general, is that the believer, in this case a Christian, claims their God accounts for those assumptions. And so actually the weird thing is that they're not actually holding to a presupposition. They're actually holding to something like that this is evidence for the God which we believe accounts for it. What you're doing, you crazy atheist, is just assuming arbitrarily that those things work. That's not correct. That's not a correct way to handle precept, because if I'm assuming it arbitrarily, that breaks down the Christian position as well. The point is not that they're being assumed arbitrarily. The point is they are inescapable axioms. The Christian takes it a step further and says that axiomatic quality comes from God. And the atheist can't account for that. And I don't understand, and Warren over there, I think, is making that same, in the live chat, is making similar mistakes, just from what little bit I'm gleaning from the live chat.
Again, okay, because you didn't respond to it, but you did accept it as valid. So P therefore Q, or P then Q, P therefore Q, okay? So P then Q would be, if somebody's invoking a metaphysic, okay, implicitly or explicitly, then they're going to be invoking a proposition as to whether or not God exists, okay?
No. There's already something really wrong with that. Like, first of all, what's going on when somebody is invoking a metaphysic, right? He's already flipped this around. He believes that his quote-unquote, the invocation of a metaphysic, big fat quotes, lots of red flags over that. Invocation of a metaphysic is what happens if I say, I feel bad today. Well, no, that's probably too subjective. The sun is shining today. There's not a cloud in the sky. Those are facts about the current weather in the location that that I'm in. He believes that making that claim is an invocation of a metaphysic, and then that entails either the existence or the non-existence of this necessary being called God. Right? I don't understand that. Like that might entail. Well, I'm just going to end up repeating myself. I'm just going to go back into the same points. But that's essentially, I think, where he's already starting to go wrong, even with this little syllogism.
You accepted this already. Unless you want to go back on this, I'd be more than happy to substantiate that. And then premise 2 is that people are either implicitly or explicitly invoking a metaphysic when they predicate, when they think about things, when they operate within the world, making judgments about things, weighing certain conclusions and outcomes with their effects or with their causes, and so on and so forth. People are undoubtedly invoking a metaphysic in their day-to-day life. So then it would then necessarily follow from those two premises that they are affirming a proposition, either implicitly, of course, or explicitly, as to whether or not God exists.
Okay,
so neutrality on this issue
This
is not possible.
Here's the thing.
So
No.
do you?
But I mean, based on where he's already going with this, I don't think Roger's going to object to this the same way I am. But this is basically like if you try to tell me that the sun is shining, you and I are both standing out in the same location, in the same weather, and you say that the sun is shining, and that's a fact. The sun is shining. What you've told me is that God is real. That's what JRobin's saying. It's the same thing because it entails. The entailment is that there is a sky and that the sun is shining and that there is a sun. Those things necessarily exist. Well, I shouldn't say that. Those things exist because there's a being that made them exist. Those things are all contingent. And there must be an uncontingent creator being that made them all. When you invoke a fact, quote unquote, invoke a fact, red flags everywhere, that means you've admitted that God exists. Right? This is the clumsiest way of trying to make this point in precept. Van Til, as bad a communicator as he could be, especially in writing, as just brevity was not a gift that he had. Did a better job with this kind of thing. It was somehow less heavy-handed, which is weird because Van Til was not heavy-handed. In fact, this is belaboring a point that doesn't really need to be made. The issue at hand here is whether, and this is where they've really gotten to. This is why it's gotten so obnoxious, because when this is wound back to hey, look, the difference is you and I are both invoking the same facts. We're presupposing things. I can account for them. The problem with the accounting for them, they used to ask Christians this quite a bit. How do you account for the laws of logic? How do you account for facts? How do you account for the law of identity or the unity and diversity or whatever, identity over time? How do you account for those things? Well, let's say that and some of those ones may not be. Those aren't going to really be axiomatic. We don't have explanations for some of them, some of those particular thought problems. But in terms of grounding axioms, as soon as you ask how you ground an axiom, you've lost the point of what it meant to say it was an axiom in the first place. And that was just constantly Google Floyd FP and Darth Dawkins conversations where Floyd keeps reminding him, look, if you're looking for the grounding of an axiom, you don't understand what an axiom is. Right? So JRobin and Darth have kind of strayed away from this, it seems, and are now on just this kind of obnoxious thing where essentially this is a long wind of saying, if you want me to agree with you about any kind of fact, you need to recognize that every time you state a fact, you are admitting that there's God. If you're not admitting that there's God, then what you're committing to is a world where there is no God, and now you need to justify that. That doesn't make sense.
Do you deny premise 2?
Look, let me just launch the argument that I have against this argument, and then we could address it, because I have an argument.
Can you answer the question, please? Can you answer the question, please? Do you deny premise 2?
Yeah, just answer the question. That's fair enough. Just answer his question and then unpack it.
The second premise is that they hold a metaphysical worldview. No, I don't deny that.
Okay, and
Now he
you
gets
accepted
to
premise one.
no Jay, he gets to unpack
Well,
now.
I want to make sure the argument is clear. Earlier, you accepted premise one, which is that if somebody is affirming a metaphysic, then they're going to be
You just asked your question.
then they're going to be affirming a proposition as to whether or not God exists. You accepted our do you still accept that, or do you want to recant on that? Do you want to backpedal?
Jay.
Recant? He picks the most loaded language. Do you want to recant? Why not use the word amend or change or clarify? No, recant. What the kid's got a it's not a brain up in that noggin. It's just a belfry filled with rabid bats.
I said I was going to step in. You had asked your question. I pressed him to answer your question because I felt it was a fair question. I advocated for you, okay? And now I told him before I asked him to unpack it. I said it's an answer, and then you can unpack it. You didn't let him unpack it. He said yes, and then you just started over talking again. So I'm going to give him the chance now to go ahead and unpack his answer to the second premise.
Okay, yeah. So let me just go through it. Okay.
Well, can I make a comment to you, Jeff, really quickly? Just a really quick comment. This is not going to be fast, but if the argument, if it's valid, right?
This is not going to be fast.
Right, and it's sound. This just means the conclusion would necessarily follow from the premises. So, I mean, what argument could he give that would falsify this? That would be relevant to the topic, right? Because Roger's not bringing up anything that's relevant to the topic at hand. He's talking about people's, what they want to admit to their beliefs and whatnot. That's not what I'm talking about.
I don't think that JRobin is completely missing the point here, because even if you were to say, okay, you might have a valid argument there, JRobin, just because that particular the validity of that argument might have something to do with saying that a person's claims affirm a metaphysic. That doesn't mean they agree with that metaphysic or acknowledge that metaphysic. To the extent that, metaphysic means whatever it is that JRobin, is magically insisting that it means at this particular point in the conversation. Because metaphysics seems to change definitions quite a bit.
I'm not talking about that. So it's not relevant.
Okay. Jay, how do you let him unpack it?
I heard him just now talking about it. Conciliatory agreement. I don't even know what he said. But he's talking about agreement and disagreement and whether or not it's reasonable.
Jay, you seem triggered, Jay. You seem very triggered, Jay.
I'm not triggered. Actually, he's already given me everything you need, right? And I'll concede that Q is just necessarily, it just follows necessarily from the premises.
Do I have to send you down? I mean, really? Do you want to have the conversation? Then
yes.
Would you please? Okay. Look. Look. Come on now, please.
Okay. Basically.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, this is sort of the kind of counter argument that I'm going to be giving to what you've been saying hitherto, which is that just because they have a metaphysical worldview that entails either the truth or the falsity of that particular belief, doesn't mean that we know all of the results of our entailments. Okay, this seems to be the critical move in your argument. That's sort of an implicit premise. And the implicit premise is what I'm objecting to. Okay, so it's still a premise.
No, I never said anything about knowledge or anything like that.
Yeah, but it's an implicit premise in the argument.
No, I'm actually rejecting anything about knowledge in this thing. I don't believe that atheists know that God doesn't exist, for example.
So if somebody doesn't know it, then why would they be convinced of it? So what are they committed to? Because it seems like what JRobin wants somebody to acknowledge when he's having this, like, don't you understand that that's what you're committing to when you quote unquote invoke a fact? That's what you've committed to, is one worldview or the other, and it better be the one where God exists. Because if it's the one where God doesn't exist, get wrecked, atheist. Because here's why that doesn't make sense. Like that. Okay, the whole point of this was to basically come out and say that an agnostic position is, for whatever reason, either incoherent or impossible. And the foundation of that claim that agnosticism is impossible is the fact that a person is committed to either the God world or the not God world because of the implications of statements they make. JRobin still has yet to show how that changes the mind or the epistemology of the thing, the individual making those statements. In the previous video, and not part one, I don't think it was part one of this. Maybe it was part one of this one. I think it was where Roger had started out with the example of a scale. I don't know if it was in this part two from Tom Rabbit or the part one video that he did when Roger was on the Worldviews and Conflict Clubhouse. But he brings up this issue of, a fact being stipulated by or being declared by an inanimate object. That was an argument that JRobin really didn't deal with. He just kind of dismissed it because the scale isn't a person, but didn't address what was happening there. By the standards that he's kind of laid out, this invocation of facts and the commitments to it, the scale should not be able to invoke facts without affirming the identity of God or affirming its existence. I think JRobin would say that because it's a scale and it was made by people, by giving you an accurate measurement, it does affirm the existence of God, which is like, okay, precisely the point. It could be, the implication could be that when I invoke a fact, the way JRobin is talking about it, that implies the existence of God. Right, if that worldview is accurate. But that doesn't have anything to do with whether I recognize whether or not that worldview is accurate. And JRobin's view seems to be that, well, because of that implication, you can't be an agnostic. That does not follow from that. A person could still be undecided. They could still be unconvinced.
I'm not saying anything about knowledge.
So I could not know whether or not God exists then. So it has nothing to do with...
No, I'm not talking about knowledge here. I'm not talking about knowledge. I'm talking about what the propositions you affirm entail.
Right,
that's all I'm talking about. That's all my argument is about.
Agnosticism is about knowledge.
Okay, fine. I'm not going to use the term agnosticism if that's what makes you happy. All I'm talking about is whether or not you can be neutral towards God's existence. And neutrality just means that you're not affirming a proposition either implicitly or explicitly as to whether or not God exists.
Do I have to know something in order to be either neutral or not neutral towards it?
Yeah.
No. I don't think they're mutually inclusive.
Okay, no. What I'm trying to say, in like however many words, is basically that you have this idea that I can be committed to some metaphysical position. That metaphysical position either entails that God exists or God does not exist. But the thing is that I could just not know that. I could just be agnostic about that very fact, and then there's no issue here. I mean, yeah, sure, it's a bivalent structure, but why does a bivalent structure logically compel me to affirm one of the disjuncts?
Well, that has nothing to do with my argument. My argument simply says
that is the heart of JRobin's argument right there. He's saying that it's the whole point. That's the whole point of bringing it up as a dichotomy. You have to accept one or the other. And now he seems to be backing away from that. This doesn't make sense.
Is that whenever you're operating in the I'm not talking about knowledge here, right? All I'm talking about is whether or not the what you do affirm entails that God exists or entails that God does not exist. And
he just restated exactly what Roger said.
I'm going to hold people now that when they are made, that's been made clear to them that they're not agnostic. Then I'm going to hold them to their standard. I'm going to hold them to what they do believe, and they should have an account for it. If they don't have an account for it, then
that is exactly the problem. They may not have that they can that is the central disconnect to this entire thing.
And that's a different conversation.
Okay,
but all my argument.
And also, there's the bigger problem here with what JRobin is doing is that this is essentially just an external critique, right? Because what he believes is that this is how the Christian worldview works, and then any other worldview needs to work exactly the same way. Otherwise, we can automatically rule that out as being false because it doesn't function in the exact same way. That's completely dishonest, right? You automatically just decided that the Christian worldview is correct, and anything else by definition is incorrect because it's not the Christian worldview. You don't even really need to get into an explanation as to why. You just define it that way, or you can just decide because it's definitionally not a Christian worldview, it therefore must be incorrect. It doesn't presuppose God, so it's wrong. So, but this idea here, where it's like, well, the reason that if he wants to get into some kind of well, as a Christian, we start with God, and therefore all this stuff makes sense. And because you don't start with anything, or you start with something else, you're automatically wrong. Why not just do that? Oh, I know why. Because if you don't stretch this out and really torture the shit out of this thing rhetorically, if you just make claims like that, you can be dismissed almost immediately. And they have been. People who have attempted these kinds of arguments in a lot less, meandering ways usually get shot down. If somebody tries to distill precept into concise, circumspect language, to keep it clear for lay people, that usually gets blown out of the water. It's just dismissed out of hand. Because essentially all the Christian's doing, especially if they're trying to say that's their defense of their faith, I accept the Christian worldview because it's the only worldview. Right? The first thing is it's the only one that's rational. Okay. And then it's the only one that's possible, therefore it's the only one that exists. And then the worldview gets conflated with reality, which is just conflated with God's revelation, and therefore they blow their original position up. Where, hey, we wanted to have a discussion about our worldview, the Christian worldview, versus all these other competing worldviews out there. And by the time you get done with it and wind it up, there are no other worldviews. It's just theirs. So they either didn't understand their apologetic, or they were lying to everyone from the jump. It can, to be fair, it can be a combination of both.
All my argument here addresses is the implications, right, and the entailments of what people say, what people do.
Okay, Jay, listen. Okay, is it possible that your mathematical beliefs entail that the Fermat's last theorem is true, or that the Goldberg conjecture is true?
Okay, whatever that is, sure.
Okay, therefore you must know that the Goldberg conjecture is true, right?
I didn't say anything about knowledge. No.
Warren, I think you kind of missed my point. Christians start with God and atheists start with nothing. Nothing to base assertions, no way to justify the implicit claim that God is not the necessary precondition, but continue gloating. I'm not gloating here. Both positions are bad. If you're trying to get to some kind of ultimate explanation as to everything or what defines it. But consider what you just said. Christians start with God and atheists start with nothing. Atheists think God has no explanatory value. Most atheists think that. So the fact that you're saying, well, we start with God, therefore we've got something, and atheists start with nothing, you got nothing. Atheists don't presuppose past the axiom. They accept the axiom because you can't deny it without affirming it. That's why it's an axiom. So they start there. Asking for grounding of axioms means you're blowing up the concept of axioms, and that's a central aspect of dealing with epistemology. Most people, believers and non-believers, are willing to accept that human understanding is limited. It has to be. Even if you're a believer, you have to recognize that because you know that there's a difference between our understanding, which is finite, and your God's understanding, which he's omniscient and the creator of all. So he has to know everything because he made everything. Nothing to base assertions, no way to justify the implicit claim that God is not the necessary precondition. Why do I have to justify a claim that there is no necessary precondition? The issue here in the conversation they're talking about, JRobin's argument and Darth's argument, is the assertion that you cannot be agnostic about this point. It has to be a God worldview or a not God worldview. You can't be somebody who is not not convinced of one or the other, because as soon as you start doing something, it automatically entails the reality, the implications of the reality of one of those kinds of worldviews, whichever one happens to be true. I agree with that, but that doesn't change a person's epistemology. And that's the central problem with this. The ultimate claim here at the end of the day is that JRobin and Darth Dawkins, when they make this kind of argument, are basically telling people what you need to do is rationally conclude that anytime you make a statement, you're affirming a world where a God exists. Therefore, not only can you not be an agnostic, it doesn't make any rational sense to be an atheist. Neither one of those follow from the issue that they're bringing up, because the issue they're bringing up is not an issue. They haven't demonstrated that agnosticism is somehow an impossible stance for someone to have. And we haven't even gotten into the very real issue of doxastic involuntarism. So, the axioms and axiomatic reasoning may be arbitrary, but they aren't random. Yeah, and I don't know that I would even call them arbitrary, because the whole notion of saying something like the law of identity, or something like when the notion of the cogito, right? And more writing has been done about this, but the idea behind it is not just that I think, therefore I am, therefore it leads automatically to solipsism. The implication of what's happening there is that if I try to deny the existence of myself, I have to be capable of existing, right? Or I have to be capable of thinking about that in order to deny myself. So the act of questioning my existence and my capacity to think and my reality kind of starts to presuppose that basis of it. I don't think that's arbitrary. I think that's inescapable. For precepts, I think initial precepts, the argument is, yeah, sure, we agree with that. That's grounded on God. Or, even better yet, Darth has even made claims where it sounds like he's trying to say that intuition is God's revelation. And that might lead to some theological problems, but that's for another time.
No.
Okay, yeah, exactly. You didn't say anything about knowledge, then I could hold on to agnosticism because we're not talking about knowledge, and agnosticism is about knowledge.
Okay, well, I told you I'm not going to use the word agnosticism because that triggers you, so I'm just going to talk about neutrality.
No, because the whole debate
and all
was about
neutrality, and all neutrality, and all neutrality refers to. So I defined. By the way, I defined. So hold on a minute. I did define how I'm using the term agnosticism.
Your mic is so loud, dude. You're like yelling, man.
Well, I have a really good mic. That's why I have a really good mic.
He might have a decent mic, but it's clipping and it's clicking, so he's got like his gain cranked. I don't spend a lot of time in Clubhouse. I mostly hear about these things after Daz and Tom Rabbit have posted these things. I watch most of the stuff after the fact, so I'm not exactly sure how audio settings work in there, but it just sounds like he's got this thing, like whatever he can do to crank up his mic so that he can blast past everybody. I think he's doing it.
It's breaking up and it's distorting.
It's a headset. Okay, and it's a good quality mic. That's why.
It's not, well, it might be good quality, but your connection sucked in this particular conversation because he's
just take a breath.
Hey,
this is the point.
Robin, this is the point. I nailed it, right? So when I said then I could hold on to my agnosticism. You said, well, then let's not talk about agnosticism. But remember, the whole topic at issue, the whole question at issue, the whole subject that we're talking about, everything that this is turning around is whether or not agnosticism is a possible position. And then when I pushed and I pushed and I pushed, and you said that the entailments of my beliefs are not necessarily something that I know, even though those beliefs are entailments, you said, well, I don't want to talk about agnosticism anymore. So when it's convenient for your argument to move away from the subject, you do so. And when it isn't convenient, you do something else. And so it's just sort of like, don't act like you're being an honest interlocutor when in reality, you've been pinned in a corner and you're lashing out now.
All right. So I never mentioned knowledge here, right? When I use the term agnosticism, I'm very clear as to what I'm.
It doesn't matter how many times Roger tells JRobin that he has to remind him of the implications of some of the things he's arguing. JRobin believes that he's got a get out of jail free card because he didn't explicitly state knowledge. I don't exactly know what that's supposed to mean if he initially is complaining about the position of agnosticism. That is sort of dealing with, whether or not you're talking about epistemology, you're talking about whether or not people are convinced of things, believe things, think they know things, all that good stuff. That has a lot of baggage to it. And he just seems to be trying to step back from that, like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they can't be neutral. Neutral about what? Neutral about what they think they believe? Neutral about things they think they know? That kind of sounds like knowledge and belief. So JRobin is just that is nothing about what he's trying to do. That doesn't help him. That actually hurts his argument. It's at this point, it just sounds like he's talking about nothing.
I'm talking about the fact that they're neutral towards God. If you've listened to any of my conversations, right, most of the time, right, I'm going to say that neutrality towards God is not something that you can hold to, right? I'll say you can't be neutral towards God. Sometimes I use the word agnosticism, but it's in a context where it should be understood that I'm conflating conflating those two terms to mean the same thing.
Okay,
right? So hold on a minute.
So JRobin wants to be held to an idiosyncratic standard when he's using the term agnostic. So he's not talking about agnosticism in terms of what people know. He's not talking about agnosticism in terms of a belief position. He's talking about, when I say agnostic, what I'm saying is people who claim to be neutral about God. Right. But the neutrality that he's talking about implies what? They're neutral how? Like, I don't understand how this helps him.
That was clear from the onset.
I should say, in what way? In what way is a person claiming to be neutral? They're claiming to be neutral in terms of whether or not they've committed to a belief or whether or not they know one way or the other. We're talking about belief and knowledge. The fact that JRobin is trying to back off this is telling.
Of the conversation, right? Because I was making it clear that you're not neutral towards God. I probably use the word neutral more than I've used the word agnosticism in this conversation.
But the topic is
because the claim I'm making here, is that you're not neutral towards God. And
No,
by
no, no.
that,
We are talking
and
about agnosticism.
all the argument
We are talking about
addresses, listen,
agnosticism. We are
all
talking
the
about
argument
agnosticism.
addresses, listen, Roger, all the argument is supposed to address is whether or not you're saying something about God implicitly or explicitly. Knowledge factors here, what you
No, that's not actually what his argument is addressing. It doesn't matter. His argument was supposed to address that whether or not you are saying, if you're invoking facts, there's an implicit aspect that basically might as well be conflated with the explicit. You are now committed to a position of a not God world agnostic, so you better get comfortable with being an atheist, because for the rest of the conversation, JRobin is going to treat you like an atheist because he believes that your indecision or lack of knowledge or lack of belief, which JRobin doesn't really, he hasn't committed to one way or the other. That's not what I mean. Your neutrality, in quotes, red flags everywhere, is an illusion. You are committed to one of the disjuncts. When this was pointed out by Roger, JRobin backed off that commitment. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they're committed one way or the other. He didn't exactly phrase it that way, but he just rejected what Roger said. I don't understand how everything that JRobin has said after this in a defense of his goofy argument and defense of his attempt to defend an idiosyncratic definition of agnosticism, which doesn't make sense, has been anything other than a confirmation of exactly what Roger was criticizing.
claim to know here is not relevant. All I'm saying is that you are saying,
Question.
either explicitly or
Question.
implicitly,
Question.
that God exists. That's
Question.
all I'm
So
saying.
even,
That's all the
even if I
argument
have that
addresses.
entailment, even if those entailments hold, I could still not know whether or not God exists. Yes or no?
No, I'm not saying you can't know. I'm not saying
Yes
that
or no?
you don't know whether
Yes or
God
no?
exists.
Hang on,
Yes or no?
I want to wind
Wait,
up
repeat the
now.
question. Let me make sure I understand the question.
Okay, yeah.
All the
Even if I
argument
have that
addresses here, what you claim to know here is not relevant. All I'm saying is that you are saying,
Question.
either explicitly or
Question.
implicitly,
Question.
that God exists. That's
Question.
all I'm
So that's being implied by what you say.
So
saying.
even
That's all the
if I
argument
have that
addresses.
entailment, if those entailments hold, I could still not know whether or not God exists. Yes or no?
My central question to Darth, many months ago, not this concise, not this blatant.
No, I'm not saying you can't know. I'm not saying
Yes
that
or no?
you don't know whether
Yes or
God
no?
exists.
Yes or no?
Why?
Wait, repeat the question. Let me make sure I understand the question.
Okay, yeah. You really better write it down. So here's the point. Even if I know all the entailments of my beliefs, or like, oh no, not if I know, even if it is an entailment of my belief, it's not necessarily true that I know the entailment of my belief, correct?
Or believe.
Or
know
belief.
the entailment of your belief?
Or,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
believe.
Sure. Okay, fine. Then QED, I've been proven right. I mean, there's nothing further to say then. That's just
No, because all the argument says is that
QED.
you're entailing.
Yeah, it just, I mean, this is so bad for JRobin. It just follows that, like, you know, if you don't know the entailment of those stances, right? Like, it could. This is I've been making this point over and over in any of these videos. Just because that's entailed doesn't mean that the person knows it or believes it. So what the hell are you talking? They can still be agnostic. This argument that they can't be agnostic does not make sense.
All the argument says is that, irrespective of what you want to admit or believe, is that your position is going to commit you logically to one of two positions as to whether or not God exists. That's all the argument here is supposed to address here.
What?
So,
hang on.
Entailing, all the argument says is that, irrespective of what you want to admit or believe, is that your position is going to commit you logically to one of two positions as to whether or not God exists. That's all the argument here is supposed to address here.
Right, but then that's not all it addresses. And then you go on to say that agnosticism as a position is impossible. But that means that you have to show a connection for it. Might entail that, but why does the person have to know or believe anything about it? I think if somebody asked JRobin, oh, this has nothing to do with whether or not I didn't say anything about knowledge and I didn't say anything about belief. I bet you that's coming next.
So I never made a claim about belief. In fact,
there it is. There it is. I never made a claim about belief, but that's part of this. You can't say this because it entails this. So you can't say that your belief stance is agnostic. That's the whole point. The whole point of his argument is to prove that agnosticism is not viable. You either are a non-believer or you're a believer. There is a God, there is a not God. There's not God. You have to be committed to one of the disjuncts in the dichotomy that I've laid out. Cool. I don't understand why he can't follow his own shit. I know why. Because it's not his own shit. He's just cribbed this from other apologists going back a while, and he doesn't really understand the entailments of all of these arguments.
Premises themselves don't say anything about belief, which should let you know everything you need to know, because all it addresses is what the propositions you do affirm entail.
But it doesn't follow that the person knows or believes that those entailments follow.
Did I ever say anything in these premises about belief or knowledge or anything like that?
Oh
Did
my
I ever say
God.
anything about that?
No, but you should have, because
Okay.
we're talking about
No, don't tell me what I should have done. Don't tell me.
No, JRobin, you should have done that, because if you didn't do that and you somehow think that this is some ripcord you could pull, you are blowing up your own argument. Roger doesn't even have to have a conversation with JRobin at this point anymore. JRobin is not committed to the entailment of his own argument. Like is JRobin agnostic about his argument against agnosticism? This is fucking pathetic.
What I should have done.
No, I will tell
That's
you.
not
I will
included
tell
in the
you.
premises. That's not included in the premises. That's not my argument.
That doesn't have to be included in the premises. It should follow from what you're talking about.
Right.
So
it
instead of
doesn't help.
misrepresenting my argument, instead of
Yeah, your argument
complaining
didn't
about
do what it's supposed to do.
instead of complaining about people being dishonest, why don't you take a look in the mirror?
Restaurant. I disagree, Jeff. The main point of his agreement to waste time and frustrate people. Yeah. I'll take that correction. Let's see here. I just honestly don't understand how a single person could defend JRobin or be convinced by his horrible arguments and presentation. I don't get it either, especially in this case. Like this is not a strong argument for them. And the whole point of this is basically to force somebody into a position of a God or not God world, right? You would present this. Darth Dawkins will spend hours badgering somebody to get them out of this agnostic position, because if they're just going to hold to an agnostic position, then Darth really doesn't have, and JRobin doesn't really have anything good against that, right? They have to force them into a binary position. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Well, the weird thing about this is they manipulate people into this. If they understood how philosophy, it took this in an attitude of charity, they could be like, okay, for the purposes of the discussion then, for the purposes of a philosophical discussion, we do need to probably approach this as a disjunct, a not God world and a God world. All right, so let's talk about that in the confines of that, and then leave the person's stated belief stance off the table then. What JRobin is seems to be smuggling in, and Darth Dawkins does this too, is that there is something wrong with you if your psychological state of agnosticism does not match the dichotomy that they're presenting for this little argument. That's not how things work. You can present something for the purpose of an argument, but it doesn't yet have an effect on your psychological state of belief. And the fact that they conflate this is just odd. It's almost as if they believe that philosophy is atheist magic. And through the power of rationalism as some kind of blood ritual, then once we've made this connection, you, atheist, must follow this down deterministically to the conclusion that my God exists. I trapped you. I got you, atheist. Checkmate. You can't do anything about this. This mentality makes no sense. Like, if you think that you're capturing minds with this abuse and torture of philosophy, you really haven't. All you're doing is you're just torturing people.
Accurately represent what I'm telling you, and if you have a rebuttal, give the rebuttal. Now,
Okay,
it seems
yeah,
like you understand, you accept my argument. So
I mean,
your position.
Did I give a rebuttal?
No, you didn't.
I mean,
Not one that actually refuted the position. If by rebuttal you're saying that you actually gave a sound refutation of my position.
Hang on.
No, you didn't.
Jay. I gave an argument, the conclusion of which agnosticism is still possible. Okay.
Did I say anything about knowledge in the premises here?
You should have, because the whole stuff.
Okay. That's not an answer to the question. Did I say anything about knowledge in the premises? Yes or no?
No, and that's a bad thing.
Good. All right. Good. So do you?
No, it's a bad thing. JRobin's response: good. Am I being uncharitable? Yeah, a little bit, but still.
Have a refutation for my argument?
Your argument doesn't prove what you need to prove.
Okay, don't tell me what I need to do, and don't tell me what I should do.
He said your argument doesn't, not you, ding dong. Your argument doesn't prove what you're trying to prove.
Argument?
I'm going to tell you.
Does your argument falsify my argument? Yes or no?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yeah.
so does it?
Hey guys.
So
Hey,
how does
look.
it
Hey, this has
falsify that you're
devolved
going to
into
be
a
making a
shouting
statement about?
match. This has
Yeah, so
devolved into a
he
shouting
hasn't
match.
actually he's
Hang on.
just giving me like irrelevant points, right? He's just
Hang,
JRobin's just being thick.
bringing up
hang on.
irrelevant things and
All right.
not
Hang
relevant
on.
to what I'm
Hang on.
saying.
Hang on. Everybody take a breath. It's devolved into it's devolved into a shouting match, and that's not what we want here.
Yeah, I don't like
I
that.
think everybody's a little frustrated, and may I suggest that I said you're probably both really tired, and we all appreciate it. Maybe it would be a good time, but let's just call this a day, and to maybe agree to meet again another time, and continue the discussion because this has been enjoyable, but it doesn't need to devolve into a shouting match where you're both
I
getting
agree.
upset.
Look, did I ever ask him what he knew? Did I ever ask him what he knew? Did I ever ask him that? No, I didn't. So he's not addressing my
Really?
argument, right?
Jay,
If
after
you
everything I
guys are
just
at a
said,
dead end, I'd be happy to talk to JRobin for a few minutes.
No, I'm not.
Ask yourself, like, I'd be happy to talk to this guy for a little bit. JRobin is, of course, he's going to object to that.
I'm not interested in doing that right now.
No, I mean, I'm willing. I'm willing to.
Can I say something? So
Yeah, sure.
I think I understand what Roger's getting at, because it sounds like Roger's expecting an argument for agnosticism, and it sounds like the argument at hand doesn't conclude that, or sorry, an argument that agnosticism is impossible. It sounds like it doesn't have that conclusion. It sounds like the conclusion was about whether it's the case that God exists or not. Am I misunderstanding the argument?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what is the argument?
The argument is that when people affirm propositions, they're going to be committed logically to the position that God exists or that God does not exist, irrespective of what they want to believe or admit or what they want to realize about themselves or about their position. They're going to be logically committed to.
That doesn't make like logically committed. I really like this because these guys have gotten into rationalism enough to think that, okay, well, if you want to be a rationalist, then you have to rationally accept things that have been rationally shown, right? Like, so, well, the rationality is inescapable and you don't want to be considered irrational, so here it is, wiggle out of that. The problem with what he's attempting to do here, though, is that I don't understand why someone would be logically committed to that belief stance, right? When they're not committed, the whole point is they're not convinced one or the other, right? They need to be, that needs to be demonstrated, right? The logic of that needs to be shown. Otherwise, they're going to be in a position where they're like, yeah, I'm not sure if a God makes more sense or a God doesn't make sense in terms of this. He's still saying the same thing. You're logically committed to one or the other, so now you're committed to defending it, whether you realize that or not, right? That's been his claim all along. Like if it's not about knowledge and it's not about belief, and a person makes the sense, the implication is if they make that set, yes, that may entail your creator God, if that actually happens to be the real description of how the world works. But why does that commit this person to that explanation logically when they're not necessarily convinced of it? Like, right? That little connection right there does not make sense, because now he's trying to get into like, whatever you want to say that you believe or whatever you know, it has to be informed by something rational, and so you need to realize this. Okay, there's another problem with this too. What if they're not a rationalist?
One of two positions, which is that either God does exist or that God does not exist. So in that sense, there is no neutrality towards God, because you're going to be committed one way or the other to whether or not God does or does not exist.
Ontologically, that might be the case if we're talking about that dichotomy. But how does that follow based in epistemology? You're committed one way or the other, whether you know it or believe it or want to admit to it. Okay, how? Right? These ding-dongs have already acknowledged this. If a non-believer or a believer make the same claim about the state of affairs and it's accurate, right? Now, he could say, like, okay, well, the sky is blue because God. The non-believer, the sky is blue, God's got nothing to, there is no God. It has nothing to do with it. And then the agnostic's like, well, the sky is blue. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with a God or not. And JRobin's just here yelling at him like, no, it logically follows. You have to be you're logically committed to either the God thing or the not God thing. Why? It could be that both of them are right. One of them is right about that position, right? That's entailed when the agnostic holds to this. But it doesn't have anything to do with their belief stance or their knowledge claims. But since JRobin's not talking, it actually seems to me like the only thing that you could really know or believe is if it's right, if it's accurate. So get wrecked, agnostics. You don't exist.
Right, but I think
I
the good point. I think the good point that Roger made, though.
Just one sec.
Well,
Hang on, guys. Point of moderation. Point of moderation. Stop. Everybody stop. Everybody stop. Everybody stop. All right. Roger, did you invite any of these people upstage?
I didn't invite Biscuit.
Did you invite Rico or Ask Yourself?
I think I accidentally clicked the one for Ask Yourself. I didn't invite Rico or Biscuit.
Okay, so I had suggested that we kind of move forward because I know both of you are tired, and I invited Biscuit because I thought you, Roger, had maybe invited one of the other two guys because I thought you wanted to open the room up, and so and it's up to both of you, Jay and Roger, of what we do here.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good time to open the room up a little bit, and let's.
Yeah, I'd like to complete my point.
Yeah, sure. Ask yourself.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How does being committed to a position not require epistemic commitment, JRobin?
Wait, come on.
Hang on, Sean. Sean.
Thanks. Yeah, so I just want, you gave it in premise conclusion form, and that's kind of what I was interested in. What was the exact conclusion of the argument?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yes, JRobin, he's asking
That the
you.
person will either implicitly or explicitly be affirming a proposition as to with reference to whether or not God exists.
Okay. And
see and that's the weird thing, right? They're explicitly or implicitly affirming, right? That's what he believes, a metaphysical proposition. That's just a weird way of saying, like, look, if you state a fact, there's an entailment that a person is affirming that a reality is a thing. A shared reality is a thing, that a fact can accurately explain it. He hasn't gotten into any of those presuppositions or any of those kinds of things. He's just, and as far as JRobin's concerned, I don't think he believes he needs to, right? Because at the end of the day, any of those things all come from God too. So.
And this is, I think, Roger's point. Does affirm there mean believe, or does it mean that it's entailed by things that they believe?
It's entailed. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Okay.
So then can I wait just one second? So then it's not an argument for agnosticism, right? Because it's simultaneously possible to have a view that entails that God exists and to not believe that God exists, right? So that's not showing.
Okay. Did I talk about knowledge here or belief here or anything like that? Did I ask what he knew?
Debates about
Did I ask him what he knew?
It pertains to knowledge.
If it's supposed to be an argument against agnosticism, then yes.
Okay.
If not,
does the
then...
conclusion say anything about agnosticism or knowledge or belief here at all?
No.
Well, that's what I'm unclear about. It doesn't.
Okay. The answer is no. So ask yourself. Like, I already said I'm not really interested in speaking with you.
Wait, you didn't hear my
so
point,
Roger,
though.
is there anything else you want to say to conclude?
Wait,
before I head out?
That's not fair, really. I mean, look.
No, I'm not interested in speaking to you. Every time, when I've heard your past interactions, it's not been, I wasn't very impressed at all. And it was actually...
I'm just going to pause this for a second. Look, if try to actually address the things, but here's a problem that I have with this statement. I disagree with the atheist position. You understand that there isn't a monolith atheist position, right? Because if you think that that's the case, then you might need to get timed out again. That's not even an honest position. I disagree with the atheist position. What is that? What is the one atheist position that everybody agrees with? I'm guessing if you're a fan of JRobin and Darth Dawkins, you don't believe in agnostics either. Are you capable of defending that? Because JRobin's not. He's getting his ass blown off.
Okay, so Jay, I'm gonna respectfully, if you're not interested in speaking with him anymore, just you could say bye and leave, or I can remove you.
I'll leave. I just want to make sure Roger has said everything he wants to say.
Wait a second. I have a response to what you said though. So no, the conclusion doesn't explicitly say anything about agnosticism, and I don't think the premise is. Yeah. So just to be clear, is what you're trying to establish that agnosticism is impossible or not? Because my point is that if that's what you're trying to establish, the argument does not establish that. That's my point.
Okay. Roger, is there anything else you'd like to say?
He's not answering the question. He's not answering the question.
That's right.
I'll
That's
just
right. I
say
said
it.
I'm not going
I'll
to speak
say
to him.
it.
I don't have to speak to him if I don't want to.
So agnosticism is possible.
Because it shows.
I'll just say it. Wait, let me just say it. Let me just say it because they'll hear me say it. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate whatever support I've gotten.
And Roger, keep in mind, this is JRobin. You're just dealing with me secondhand anyway, because I supplied Roger with this point, right? So
Well, then if that's what he's going to do, if that's all Roger has to say, then I'll just leave right now. I'll say goodbye, and
No,
I'm not going to do that.
I was making this.
So I'm not doing.
Oh God. Like these guys have never like handed each other little information like, oh, you know what, this person brought up something. Maybe ask them about that point. Like JRobin, although as unpleasant as JRobin is, I don't think that no one. There's probably no one attempting to help him, and even if they were, JRobin would probably mute and kick them and never talk to them again.
Doing that.
I don't.
Right, so I'm not gonna do the secondhand.
You can run away again.
Yeah, well,
proxy kind of thing.
JRobin, I'm not going to do the second-hand thing. He's right there. Roger and Ask Yourself are right there. You don't have to do anything second-hand. They're right there, and you're refusing to talk to them. The second-hand thing doesn't apply anymore. This is laughable. This is the equivalent of exposing the flaws in someone's argument for God and then saying, oh, my argument had nothing to do with God. Yeah, it kind of feels like that. Yeah, you noticed that, Gran? Yeah, sorry about that. Excuse me, Granadicius. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly.
I'm not doing
Debate
that.
it firsthand. I'm right here.
No, I'm not
right
interested
now,
in speaking
okay?
to you right now. Not right now. No.
Ask
Can
yourself,
we just
maybe
let
just-
Roger speak for a second?
Yeah, just
Can
let me
Roger-
All right. So Roger, did you want to say
All right,
anything?
hang
Do you
on.
want to say anything before I head out?
I want to reply to what I said.
Well, you're not going to get a reply,
You're not gonna get a
unfortunately. So
reply.
Roger, is there anything else you want to say?
Wait a second. Let's just make sure that we're clear about what's being asked here. Okay. I want to understand if it's an argument for agnosticism, right? Because
All right. I think the answer to that is clear. I think the answer to that is clear.
Okay,
So
what's
Roger,
the
do you
answer?
need
Hey,
Roger?
JRobin,
Roger, is there anything else you want to ask me?
I like that JRobin just asserts, oh, well, it's clear that you don't have any. No. Like, JRobin, why not just, like, there's an interesting explanation for them. Why not just say, look, I'm not going to clarify this any more than I already have. Just go back and listen to it more. He could just say that. Instead, he's like, no, that's not the case, right? Like, why don't you just Ask Yourself he's stupid? And the reason for that is because gaslighting is for whatever reason in JRobin's mind more efficient, because now I guess he can look smart if he's not on here calling people stupid dumb heads, even though I'm really picking up on the stupid dumb head kind of attitude from JRobin. Like this this idea that I can well, if I couch this in passive aggressive gaslighting bullshit, I will look like the smarter person is not working for JRobin, but well, maybe it's working for him amongst Christians.
Or
Yeah,
say,
I mean, yeah, I would.
Is that a yes or a no? JRobin, was that a yes or no?
Roger, is there anything else? Roger, I can't hear you. There's a lot of noise.
Robin's mic
Roger,
is too
Roger,
loud.
can you answer the question, please?
Stop the sophistry. Listen.
All right, Roger, I can't hear you. There's a lot of noise in the background. Can you please?
Saying that's bullshit right there too. I can't. When somebody is talking to him that he doesn't want to address, he'll start talking about their interjections as if it's noise. Like that is just chicken shit behavior from him.
There's a lot of obstruction. Can we?
Stop the sophistry, JRobin. Is that a yes or a no? That's all I'm asking.
Roger, I can't hear you. Can you please repeat your answer? I couldn't
stop
hear you.
being a moderator? Like,
That's
what's
a
going
yes or
on?
No question.
I don't. Okay,
Yes,
hang
no
on.
question.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to do this. Okay. Sorry about that. Ask Yourself, I love you, and I love your YouTube channel. I need to make the point independently.
Well, I'm gonna keep asking until I get kicked. Robin, answer the fucking question. Stop trying this suicide by mod bullshit. Every time someone who can actually debunk you shows up in the room, you flee like a little bitch. I'm here right now. I showed something about your argument, okay? I'm showing if it's an argument for agnosticism, which, as far as I understood it's supposed to be, it doesn't work.
So is Ask a mod
Possible.
now? Can anybody?
Sorry, because it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I was given mod powers. He would be gone right now if it was up to me. But Roger, is there a question that you want to?
Yeah. Well, there's
Or
a
is there
point.
anything you want to say?
There's a point that I want to make.
Why was JRobin given mod powers?
So the point that I'm trying to make here is the following: the argument that you've presented, as you've presented it in your most recent formulation, does not have as its conclusion that agnosticism is impossible or that it's irrational. So, as an argument against agnosticism, it doesn't work. Did
I make any claims to knowledge in my argument? Yes or no?
You did not. But you
Okay.
should have.
So do you have? Okay, don't tell me what I should have done. Do you have a refutation of my argument here?
Why the fuck not, JRobin? You're talking to a guy who's a grad student in philosophy, and you're attempting to use philosophy to. Well, you're not trying to convince anyone, right? Like the only point of this is to flex for Christianity. But wouldn't you want to know? Like, of all the people that you'd probably want to tell you, to give you instructions on what you should or shouldn't do when it comes to making arguments like this, especially if you want to be convincing. I mean, think about how much better you could flex for Jesus if you had some of that stuff from Roger. I really think that the reason that he doesn't is because JRobin knows that a commitment to that kind of training and that kind of study will probably make him less dogmatic. And being less dogmatic means less flexing. So that's not appealing for JRobin. Yeah, moderator Jeff has good intentions, but it's tough to appropriately mod JRobin without him leaving within a few minutes. Yeah, I think that's what Ask Yourself meant there when he was talking about suicide by mod kind of thing. Like, he'll complain that he's being overtalked and the mods aren't working, right? This is the same kind of diva behavior you see from like Darth Dawkins. Like, oh, the room had just turned to shit, and I had to get out of there because it was just, the mods couldn't control it, and I was being overtalked, and no one was making any sense. Yada yada yada. And it's like usually most of that noise is being, injected into the room by Darth. And in this case, JRobin was doing the same thing. He was the one acting like a baby every time Ask Yourself was, instead of just letting Ask Yourself finish the question and then responding to it, as soon as Ask Yourself starts talking, JRobin has to treat it like it's background noise. And, oh, I'm not hearing from Roger. I'm not hearing from Roger. Roger, are you there? I'm sorry. Is someone speaking to me? Like that, just, sinister, dandy kind of routine that JRobin tries to pull off in here is really fucking weird.
I mean, I think that your argument is generally right, but I think it's trivial.
Good. All right. Good. Thank you very much. So you can't be neutral towards God.
Yeah, he does. But then when he gets pushed on that, he'll just say that his definition of agnosticism is his own.
Yeah, but no.
So you can't be neutral towards God. Oh, well, that's my position, and that's what I came here to defend.
No, that's
you
not.
can't be neutral towards God. Roger, which position are you? Are you in the God worldview or the not God worldview?
This is why you don't give him mod powers. I don't know who did that, but that was a mistake. I think maybe they did that because they were afraid he was going to up and leave, like if he couldn't kick people. But now he's going to get even more. He's going to bully more.
Okay, listen, JRobin. I know that you have a really.
God does not exist because.
Why are you doing that? This had nothing to do with the argument they were having before, and it has nothing to do with the argument that they're having now. JRobin is the one that came in here. He followed Roger over here. And they've been talking for 54 minutes, and this is what it's devolved into, is him asking his goofy, loaded question again.
Jeff, am I...
Roger, God does not exist because...
Is this a conversation?
Like, why would you repeat it, JRobin? What the fuck? Like, if you get an exasperated sigh out of your opponent, like, then leave it. I think he thinks he's really like, these are the killing blows. Like, you can't possibly defend yourself against that devastating question. Like, sure thing, Jay. Sure thing.
Or are you?
Yes.
No, yeah,
God does not exist because.
No. Oh, come on, Jay.
Jesus.
Really?
Yes, really. So he knows now he doesn't. He can't escape this. So he knows his position entails the falsity of God. So there is no God because.
Jay, this looks.
How? Yeah, this looks.
This looks so bad for you.
This
Jay.
looks bad.
This does. Like, what the fuck? Like, oh no, now you understand what I'm like. Roger has been like talking circles around this crap argument at JRobin's for the better part of an hour, and it was doing so beforehand until Darth Dawkins came in there and ruined the conversation with his nonsense. And this is just. So you now that you've conceded my point, now you need to concede that I've won. Like, fucking A, dude. Fucking A. Get a girlfriend.
Bad for you.
Or boyfriend. Sorry.
Do you not see this? How bad this looks for you, Jay?
All right, Roger. There is no God because.
Jay, you're resorting to your script. Come on now.
Dude, can we just have a conversation?
Well, Roger's accepted now that his position entails that there is no God.
Jay,
I never said that.
Yeah, that's so stupid, JRobin. Like that's weak sauce even for him.
Okay, so your position is going to entail either that God does exist or God does not exist. So which one is it?
No. Okay, listen to the specific
Which one is
argument.
it?
Jeff, this is not an interrogation, okay? Like, I came up here to have an honest conversation about the argument.
Yeah, I suggested a few minutes ago that we kind of let this go.
Jim, there might be something. Yeah, there might be something to that. What are JRobin's emotional and psychological motivations for needing to do this? Like, especially given that he thinks his position is as strong as it. No one can stop me. Like, okay, then why are you on Clubhouse all the time, trying to assert this? Like, I think maybe it's because you know that it's not that as strong as you think it is.
So I don't know. I think Roger, you're kind of at your end, and Jay, I don't know.
I'm willing to have this, but
okay.
if I'm going to get yelled at, then I don't want that.
All right, so Roger, which position are you in here?
Let me just try to make my point, okay? And this is a point that I came to independently. This was not purely from Ask Yourself. I was getting inundated by like 17 different people. This is the point that I'm trying to make. As the argument stands, the formal argument in syntactic form, the conclusion of the argument does not say that agnosticism is irrational or that it's impossible. It does not say that. So as an argument for that conclusion, it is ineffective. The argument...
All right, so, Roger, you're affirming a metaphysic. That metaphysic entails either that God does or does not exist. So what does your metaphysic entail?
Jay, you just started over talking Roger.
Yeah, he started over talking him, and he's not even addressing the reality of what's going on there. Like he's trying to tell him, your argument for the impossibility of agnosticism, like it's a nonsensical position. It does not prove what you think that it does. It doesn't follow from what you've laid out that's a reasonable or rational conclusion. And what's JRobin's response to that is to try to roll him back into the kind of sophistry that a lot of precept things start with. Oh, okay, well then when you're saying that this is no different. Like JRobin usually does this kind of thing where you're like, oh, okay, well does that are you affirming a God position there, or do you know that one where that Tone Loc, who is sort of like, I hate to use this comparison, but if JRobin is like Clark Kent Superman, Tone Loc is like Bizarro. Tone will just basically, like, when he gets cornered, he'll just say that people don't know it. Right? They'll just say, can you know that? Can you really know that? Like, you don't have any right to invoke facts, or something just nonsensical like that. This is what precept does to people. It's a debilitating illness.
He was talking. Please, Roger, you've continued, and then Jay, you can respond.
Okay, sure, thank you. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that in order for you to have an argument that deductively ascertains the impossibility of agnosticism, I need, as a conclusion of that argument, the impossibility of agnosticism. All you've shown with this argument, which is, I think most people could agree to, it's trivial, is that if I form some metaphysical worldview, that has some bearing about whether or not God exists. But that doesn't, that's all that tells me. It doesn't tell me anything about whether or not agnosticism is irrational, unreasonable, not possible, and whatnot, because I could not know all of the entailments of my beliefs. For instance, you believe, let's say, for instance, in arithmetic and everything. Okay, but there's surely some theorems within arithmetic that you have no previous acquaintanceship with. But your commitment to, I could run an identical argument. I could say, if you use arithmetic, then you are committed to a particular arithmetic system. Then they're committed to like either this conjecture being true or this conjecture not being true. You are committed to arithmetic, therefore you're committed to that conjecture being true or it not being true. And then I could say, well, then you can't be agnostic about that conjecture. But no serious mathematician or philosopher of mathematician takes that seriously, because it's not necessarily the case that you know all the entailments of your belief. And agnosticism is about knowledge. Agnosticism is about knowledge. It is about whether or not we have enough credence to warrant knowledge about a particular proposition. The agnostic splits the difference and they throw their hands up and they say, I don't know. It's about knowledge, because the principal thing is to say, I don't know. And if you say, well, I don't care about agnosticism, then you just don't care about what the whole point of what this debate was about from the start. We came to this room, we had this discussion to discuss agnosticism. If you don't want to do that, if you want to bring up other things, if you want to go back to your script, if you want to self-destruct, you can do that in your own room, and that is perfectly within your purview. But the fact of the matter is, you presented me a formal argument that did not demonstrate the conclusion that you had set out to. And for those reasons, the argument is unsuccessful. I've produced counter arguments that you have not responded to. And for these reasons, in a debate context, it's very clear that if we were to score this, I would win. Sure, my sentences are long, but they're articulate and they're precise. And I'm excited to hear you yell at me now.
All right.
I'm excited to hear you yell at me now. I think more people need to steal that phrase from Roger whenever they're talking to JRobin or Tone or any of these guys. Let's see, Scott. Yes, Scott Duke. Debilitating illness. Maybe precepts can apply for handicapped stickers. I don't know that I would. I think I would be in support of that. But then, you'd get those inevitable, well, I don't identify as a preceptor. I'm not a preceptor. I'm a Christian. It amazes me how many Christians will utilize different aspects of a precept argument, but will not commit to that. And I don't blame them. I think it's terrible to address the statement that Slim made. He was trying to convince me. I want Jefferson to come to the fullness of the truth in the Catholic faith, but boom, Recht won't get him there. Yeah, I agree that's not going to get him there. But if I have told people this, it's if I was inclined to go back, which I don't think you can, because once you kind of, well, that's probably not true. But I would be more inclined towards either Eastern Orthodox or Catholicism, just because of the structure. And yeah, come at me, evangelical Protestants, with everything that you got, because I just think like most of you need to give that crap up and just get back, go back under the big tent, and work things out amongst yourselves. Splitting off and creating your own little fringe groups. I think that's a terrible move.
So Roger, you affirm metaphysics, correct?
I do.
Okay.
But here's the thing, JRobin. Roger can affirm a metaphysic because Roger studies this stuff. Roger is a grad student in philosophy. So if you ask someone who is a philosopher in training, hey, do you affirm a metaphysic? They can probably say, yeah, they do, because they actually understand what that means. But if you ask someone who is a layperson about affirming a metaphysic, when you initially ask them whether or not they believe or don't believe in God, most people are going to take that as being a question about their psychological stance, their belief state, whether they're inclined to believe that there is a God, or they just don't think that it's either they don't think it's real, they're not inclined to believe it's necessary, whatever, right? These guys always do this. They start from that kind of position, and they're like, oh yeah, well there's some philosophy here that will really fuck you up if you just want to, like, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. You can show people tons of arguments. You could demonstrate a syllogism to people. It's not necessarily that's not going to be the thing that really convinces them. And I don't think that I would be impressed if any of these guys said that they concluded God from some of these arguments, that was what did it. Because my question would then be, well, do you have any kind of personal testimony about this? Have you ever had a subjective religious experience? Do you have any kind of feelings about this? What do you feel about the tradition? And my inclination is if they got pulled in by these kinds of arguments, my guess is they're probably not attracted to sort of the kind of less melodramatic, more sober biblical criticism stuff that tends to reside under the roof of either Roman Catholicism and maybe Eastern Orthodox.
Does that entail that God exists?
I don't know.
Okay. So by
that's actually a good question. Yeah, that's a good answer.
Metaphysics, you're answering questions with reference to what the nature of truth is, what the nature of possibility and impossibility are, et cetera, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, now either the answer to that is that it's going to be fundamental in the mind, or that it's fundamental and not a mind, or that there is no fundamental basis to which question. I mean, the answer wouldn't even be an answer to that question, right? So do you believe that what is fundamental, because you have an answer to this question, right? So it means you're affirming a proposition. Is the answer to that proposition that which is fundamental being a mind? Yes or no?
Is the answer to that which proposition?
What the nature of truth? You told me you have a position on your metaphysics. So is the nature of truth grounded in a fundamental mind? Yes or no?
Not in my view, no.
Okay, good. Then that would entail that there is no God, according to your position.
No. That would just entail that the truth isn't grounded in a mind.
Uh-oh. What's JRobin going to do here? He's probably going to say that doesn't follow, or no. You're not listening to me, Roger.
Yeah, that's what God would be.
Okay, but
your position entails that.
Okay.
There is no God, Roger.
Grounded in a mind.
Okay, Roger.
So, I mean, pantheism
Roger.
is still true, and God
Roger. God is defined as that which is ultimate and a mind. Okay.
Sure.
So all of your bloviating, all of your pontificating has reduced down.
Tovia Singer could probably talk me into Judaism, if anyone could. Tovia is a funny guy. Although of the videos that I've watched, when he does get into like the Judaism and sort of starts preaching it, that's usually when I start kind of glazing over. Like, nah. Yeah, I don't think so. But I do like listening to him get into especially like, I mean, he rips into Catholics obviously because of doctrine and dogma and tradition and stuff like that. But it is fun to see Tovia Singer trigger a lot of Christians when he starts getting on a roll about how much he hates Paul. It's hilarious.
Down to this, the answer to the question obviously is no. So you exist as an individual who holds to the position that there is no God. So there is no God because
this is interesting because Roger just tried to get into like another definition for God, which because I think he started to say the word pantheism, right? And what what JRobin is essentially doing here is holding him to the dichotomy, the God as JRobin defines it, the ultimate creator God that is a mind, or it's not that, right? So this is kind of fucked up because I kind of wonder like how JRobin would deal with this. Like, okay, it either is this God or it's not that God, right? That's the disjunct, right? But what he seems to think is it's either God or it's an absence of any gods. It's my God or nothing. That's not necessarily the case, right? I mean, the dichotomy would be God exists or God does not exist. And if it's the one that he's defining, great. But the goofy thing about holding to, because he tried to say that that's not what he was trying to commit people to earlier in this discussion, but now that's exactly what he's going to try to pin Roger to. He has to believe in either he believes in the God that Roger is defining, or he believes in the absence of any God, because only the definition of God that JRobin is offering is allowed in this particular discussion. Anything else that is not addressing JRobin's his concerns.
Look, I'm not going to let the script
This
go
is
on,
ridiculous.
This is just embarrassing.
He doesn't have a rebuttal. Look at this. Now he's self-destructing. All of his projections.
He's self-destructing? Like, you've been doing that for the last 20 minutes, JRobin.
To me has now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
I'm not self-destructing.
Okay, yeah. Fine. You can tell yourself that. So there is no God because.
Yeah.
And the only thing that he's managed to do now is wind it back to the whole thing where a person can't be agnostic about God, but that person can't be agnostic about the very particular God that JRobin is defining. I don't understand why that. Of course, they could be agnostic about that. Right? There are competing claims about God. Just getting out of the sort of binary relationship or whatever he's trying to do in setting up the philosophical argument. Let's step back away from that and just get into like other claims being made about gods. The one that JRobin has on offer. The vast majority of people in their actual experiences in the world are exposed to more than just, here are your options. JRobin's idea of God or nothing. Nothing. Because nothing else reals, nothing else matters. Okay, cool. But that's not all that they can be exposed to. There are pantheist concepts and panentheistic concepts and polytheistic concepts that would be floating around out there. So, yeah, way to go, JRobin.
Yeah, I'll
Really?
tell myself, and I'll tell my PhD.
That's okay. Look, all of your
enjoy
atheist friends
masturbating
can,
in your
look,
basement,
that's okay. All right, okay, that's okay. There's no God because.
guys.
So
He has to bring it up again. There's no God because, like, good God, JRobin. I think I would enjoy talking to JRobin when I'm in one of my crueler moods. Imagine, have you ever talked to JRobin at all, Jim? Like on Discord or anywhere? I don't know that I've ever seen that.
oh, look, Roger, you don't have a rebuttal.
The debate is about agnosticism. The debate is about the truth and possibility of agnosticism. You're going back to.
I won't talk about knowledge here, right? I'm talking about neutrality towards God and what your position entails.
Wait, neutrality towards God entails that I have no knowledge either way.
That's no, neutrality just means that no. Neutrality just I'm talking about it with reference to the fact that your position does or does not entail or does entail the falsity of God or the non-existence of God.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily know the entailments of my beliefs. We've been over
Well, you do know the entailments because you just told me the answer to the question is that what you hold is not a fundamental mind, but you do hold to something, right? So it's just not a mind. So it's just the falsity of God. So you do believe that there is
no. At that point, it's the falsity of your God in particular, JRobin. That's getting a little goofed up. Because it's not entailed from Roger's position, the metaphysic that he affirms that there is no God. It would be a God that would be under a different definition. He just didn't believe that, how did he put it, like that all truth or all facts are sort of held by that mind.
No God. Your position is the case that there is no God.
No, again, let me reiterate the point that I made to you previously.
Okay, go ahead and reiterate it.
The motive.
He's trying to, JRobin. What a condescending little brat.
Ponens, the modus ponens that you engendered, okay, was P implies Q, P therefore Q. The Q is analogous to G or not G. So really it should have been P implies G or not G, P therefore G or not G, right? So the only thing that you've concluded from your argument is that either it's the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists.
No, that's not what I said. That's not my argument. That's not my argument. So you just mischaracterized my argument. My argument is that your position.
The only thing that you've concluded from your argument is that either it's the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists.
No, that's not what I said. That's not my argument. That's not my argument. So you just mischaracterized my argument. My argument is that your position. My argument is that your position is going to entail the cause that God exists or does not exist. You are going to be affirming either implicitly or explicitly that God exists. And once that's been made.
No. Again, this needs to be, I think, illustrated enough. I'm not an agnostic would not be affirming that. An actual agnostic would back with, no, I'm not affirming that because I don't know that. If what JRobin is talking about ontologically is true, that there's a God, that could be entailed by things that agnostic is saying. But that is not the same, that does not mean that the agnostic, therefore, is affirming that worldview. That requires belief or knowledge, which that person either is, it's a belief state that they're not committed to, because they're not convinced one way or the other, or we're talking about knowledge, which they claim they don't have. They don't have enough knowledge to know one way or the other, and they're undecided as to the position. I don't understand why JRobin can't hold, and well, I do understand why he has to hold to this, because this is part of this, like, oh, we've got agnosticism on the ropes here. We can just cut that right off, and now we can start pigeonholing people into this dichotomy where you either accept the God as I define it, or you are forced to argue from a position that any of the things that we share, facts of reality, a shared reality, subjective experience, sense perceptions, blah, 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 all that stuff, is predicated on nothing. That's the dichotomy that he's like, it's either God or it's an absence of that God. Okay, the absence of that God does not entail nothing. That is being introduced in here because that's part of their belief system. And I don't know if I can emphasize that enough. God exists or God doesn't exist, because for them the absence of a God means that then there wouldn't be anything that would predicate on it, and that's where this talking past each other is happening. Even with Roger, Roger's is saying no, that person could affirm a different metaphysic. Now they've got it. JRobin, Tone Loc, Darth Dawkins, any of these other, no, that ain't going to work. That's not the Christian worldview, so it doesn't work. It's not a great substitute. And I just want to, and here's what you're committed to. But the agnostic is affirming, one way or the other, is that God exists and is the necessary precondition for everything, or that nothing is. I don't know of an agnostic who is going to affirm either one of those positions, even if it necessarily is one or the other. What JRobin is talking about, he's just blasting air out of his ass here.
Once you've been made aware of that, okay, I'll have some questions to ask you. Namely, God does not exist because. Now, your position is like there is no God. It implies that. That is the implication necessarily of your position. I just asked you. You just made it clear. You believe that whatever it is that's the source of all that is, can be, cannot be, it's not a fundamental mind. Now, you obviously know that because you say you have a metaphysical position. Okay? So, there is no God because?
That's not the topic of the debate.
All right, Roger, there's no God because? So
this is not the topic.
Yeah, Jay, I'm
good. Yeah, JRobin is completely derailing the original topic of the debate. Right, and I'm sure the thing is that he's probably gone on to tell people that Roger couldn't provide him answers, was evasive, was dodging his questions. Even though this little thing is taking a jag down into, and the whole thing behind that, the reason that question doesn't work, God does not exist because that is not really laying out honestly the type of question that it is. JRobin will shift back and forth between talking about a person's psychological state and a person's philosophical stance on a particular argument, and then sort of slowly roll out these kinds of things, and then insist that those are philosophical commitments that, hey, you non-believer, agnostic or atheist, you have to concede that this is rational, and if I demonstrate its rationality, it's inescapable. You have to take it. You have to accept it, right? But just because it's rational doesn't mean it's true. Like JRobin seems to have a real hard time with that. But this is a guy that I think mistakes the validity of arguments with soundness of arguments, and so he thinks that if you can structure something in a way that, the inference rule is truth preserving, that means it's true, right? No. But at this point, even given that the safety of operating within that structure, he still can't do it. He's not disciplined enough to hold on to that. And any attempts that Roger has done a good job several different times of showing why this argument doesn't conclude the impossibility or incoherence of an agnostic position, and JRobin is left with God does not exist because. Now you've rolled it back into something where it sounds like JRobin now wants to shift the conversation to have a talk about Roger's personal belief states, when they were very pointedly and concisely dealing with strengths and weaknesses in JRobin's argument, and JRobin has taken every opportunity to shit all over that. Roger was attempting to steelman this argument and attempting to work through this multiple times in the previous conversation. Now JRobin has followed him over here to continue to harass him and bait him with this kind of stuff and not accept any of these points. He's not going to take any of the stuff that he's heard from Roger and use this to fine-tune this argument later. He thinks that it's just rock solid and kick-ass, and there's no one's ever going to show that he's weak or wrong or anything, even though Roger just demonstrated it, but not to JRobin's satisfaction, right? And Roger can't, because Roger doesn't affirm a worldview. The only person that's ever going to convince JRobin that he's wrong is God. And unfortunately, since he doesn't exist, we just have JRobin being a narcissistic douchebag.
I'm ready to boot you from the room if you don't stop off the script.
Okay, that's fine. I can go to my own. I'll go to my own. I think
it's up to you, man. I mean,
Robin, listen. This is the point.
Wow.
The point to make in closing and summarizing the kinds of arguments that I'm making is as follows. You presented an argument which is, if I affirm a particular metaphysical worldview, then that metaphysical worldview says something about whether God exists or God does not exist. I hold to a particular worldview, therefore that worldview determines, has a particular position on whether God exists or God does not exist. I could not know the exact entailment that my worldview is committed to when you stretch out all the propositions that are entailed by my position. And because I could not know that, and it's logically possible for me to not know that, it is in fact logically possible for me to be agnostic, because agnostic is about a suspension of belief with respect to a knowledge claim. Okay? So this is preserved. In addition, you made no rebuttal to my argument from the epistemology of conciliation and pure disagreement. So if William Lane Craig was in this debate, that's accepted for the sake of argument because you had no reply. Okay? In addition to that, you presented like 17 arguments prior to the one that you did. Each of them failed. You acknowledged that, and now we're on this last.
I didn't acknowledge that, so stop lying about what I'm telling you. I didn't present 17 different arguments. They all had the same conclusion, and they were all essentially the same thing.
Yeah, Roger might actually be getting this wrong, because I initially thought this too, that JRobin had actually kind of admitted that he was wrong about some other positions or other claims that he made. But I think when JRobin said that, and that was either in this part 1 from Time Rabbit or part 2, this one earlier on, or it was in part 1. I think it was at the beginning of this one. When he says that, I think he was just being sarcastic, but in a very passive-aggressive way. So it was a little hard to tell. In context, it seemed like he was just being sarcastic. So Roger may have reached the wrong conclusion there. I initially did too. I thought JRobin was actually admitting to, like, oh yeah, I held some wrong positions or whatever, in the past. But I think he either he said that or he repeated it back to Roger in a way that was just meant to be kind of patronizing and sassy.
Somebody's going to be affirming a proposition, right? And that the proposition they're affirming is that either God does or does not exist. It's going to be that proposition. It's not an issue of you refuting 100 different arguments, because I've only presented to you one main position, okay? One main argument, okay? Which is that somebody's going to be holding a position. Now, maybe you might have had 17 different conversations going on in your head, which is fine. But my position, and what I've articulated to you, is that people are affirming a proposition. And if they're affirming a proposition, then they're going to be affirming, at least propositions with respect to the metaphysic, then they're going to be affirming that God does or does not exist. Okay?
Yeah, what do you mean by
now listen here.
Their entanglements affirm or they affirm? There's a difference.
They're going to be affirming when they answer the question as to their metaphysical framework, the answer to the question as to whether or not, or what the foundational nature of reality is either going to be a mind or it's not going to be a mind. Okay? Now they're going to...
What's the big deal behind that? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not some kind of concept of a God. Right? Like a deist wouldn't be in that position, so I don't understand, like, what's he going to do then? A deist believes in a creator God but doesn't think that it's a mind per se. Right? Then what are they going to do? Like, no, your concept of God is wrong, and then they're just going to have to be like, what you need to do is read the Bible and get away from your Stargate episodes or whatever it is you think is informing your deism. Sorry. Needless dig on Stargate.
I have a position, as you already told me.
No, they're not.
They're going to have a position.
They're going to have.
Yes, they are. You just told me, and you accepted that is the case.
You're misrepresenting me. All I'm saying in this kind of instance is that when I hold to a particular belief, right? So for instance, let's say I hold that arithmetic is true. It could very well be an entailment of that belief that Fermat's last theorem is true, okay? But I don't know that Fermat's theorem is true. You actually have to, even if you have logical entailments in your belief within your mind and something entails something else, in order to actually assent to that subsequent proposition, you have to go through and do the work in your head and actually see the eventual entailment. But the idea is that the agnostic is saying, look, I just don't see this kind of entailment, and until I do, and until it's definitively demonstrated to me, which hitherto it has not been, I'm within my epistemic rights to withhold judgment.
Okay, Roger, you have a metaphysic, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Why? I don't understand why they've already talked about this. This is already this should be done and over with.
That by that we're saying that you have an answer to the questions as to the nature of truth, falsity, right?
Okay.
Both distinct from each other.
Now, let me play this.
That's not even really how a metaphysic works, right? A metaphysic it ends up getting sort of asserted as a hypothetical. Even if you do believe in it, you're convinced that it's most likely to be the true origin of whatever foundation it is for the rest of your philosophical thinking or whatever. This idea, like, oh, because so you have an answer for it. Like that's just a clumsy way of kind of talking about these things.
Let me play this game.
You have an answer to those questions, correct?
No. You're running the script.
If not, then that's a different issue. But you do.
Okay.
But you do have an answer to those questions, correct?
No. Here's the point.
Oh, you don't. You don't.
No, not to the ones that you think that agnostics need to have an answer to. Let me just point this to you. Okay.
So you don't. So what does it mean for you to?
Will JRobin let Roger actually complete a response? No, he's just going to move on to another question so that he can. Oh no, I want to stop you right there so that I can continue to take that last response out of context. Excellent work, JRobin. You're an effing moron.
Invoke truth. What does it mean for you to predicate? To make truth declarations, if you don't have access to what it means for things to be true.
I hold to a correspondence theory of truth, but this is not.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. Hold on a minute. So I want you to unpack the correspond. Are you saying that truth is that which corresponds to reality? Is that your position?
Generally speaking, yes, but we're not debating the correspondence.
Okay. We're talking about the nature of reality. Okay. They're talking about the actuality of states of affairs. So
anytime JRobin talks about this is his conception of ontology. I'm pretty sure anytime he starts describing it this way and then he uses the word metaphysic, he's just talking about ontology, all the stuff that is, which includes his concept of God, which I'm assuming is some kind of like gladiator-looking super beast kind of thing. I just kind of think that,
When propositions invoke them, okay, that they're intelligible, they're with reference to a broader, ultimate, metaphysical context. So do you have access to that context or no?
Not the context that you attach to. I have a different context.
Okay, so then what is...
Stop covering for Benghazi, Jim. Benghazi knew. It's just that now that horrible little ditty from that old couple, that terrible video, it's going to be stuck in my head for a little while until I find something to replace it, which I'll be doing as soon as I end this video.
So then what does it mean for you to invoke propositions that reference states of affairs?
What does this have to do with agnosticism?
Well, the point is that if you don't have an answer to that question, you're not actually meaningfully predicating.
No. Because, again, JRobin is trying to make this connection to, well, if no matter what you're predicating, quote unquote, you're affirming, quote unquote. No, you're not. Like this is a burden that these guys have attempted to do with this precept crap for a long time. It makes absolutely no sense. A person can talk about facts and not necessarily either believe or understand the full entailment of what those facts. Or all the entailments of those facts. Just like a person, I don't know how many times Roger had to try to explain this to him. Like, if you're using arithmetic and you're using it accurately, that the accuracy of that arithmetic, that might entail the accuracy of some theorem, but you don't even have to be aware of that theorem in order for this to work. And apparently, that's just soared right over JRobin's head. He doesn't understand that example perfectly applies with what he's trying to impose here, but now he's right back to doing this again. No. When you say this, you're affirming everything that this thing's based on. Why are you doing that? How is that even the case? This would say this. The implication to this seems to me like you couldn't be accidentally right. Right? Could somebody be accidentally right or no? Because if they make a claim, then it's they're affirming something about ultimate reality, and therefore it's true. No, that doesn't follow. Somebody could just be accidentally correct about something. In fact, that's the whole fucking point of sin nature. Just because you're in sin doesn't mean you can't understand, what a Wednesday is, or or recognize your loved ones, or regret the crimes you've committed, or whatever the case may be. Like, you'd still be able to function. That's sort of the whole point.
No,
you're not actually. Well, you just wouldn't be predicating at that point because it would just be meaningless utterances out of your mouth, right?
Okay, could you just let me make arguments? Okay, so the argument that I was going to make previously was the following. Look, I'm just going to do the dialectic for you because you're too impatient. So this is how it would have run if it ran successfully. So it would have been, JRobin, do you affirm a particular view of arithmetic? Yes, I do. Okay, perfect. Is an entailment of that arithmetic the Goldberg conjecture? And then I would have been like, Yes. So you affirm the existence of the Goldberg conjecture. You know that the Goldberg conjecture is true, or some other unknown conjecture.
I don't know what the Goldberg conjecture is.
Exactly.
Exactly, JRobin. That's the point of his example. But this isn't the this is like the 6th time that Roger's attempted to use this basic example. Oh man.
Exactly. So how could you affirm it? How could you affirm it? This is a consequence of your view. Is that I have to
No, not necessarily.
Or affirm. No.
And yeah, hey Jim Hoffmeister. Yeah, this example that you give here is basically very very close to what Roger is attempting to illustrate for him, right? Like, this isn't necessary, but for whatever reason, JRobin believes that that's this is why agnosticism is either incoherent or impossible. No,
I have to affirm all the entailments of my beliefs.
For one, the fact that you may not know what the Goldberg conjecture is doesn't mean that you would be denying it. Okay? Because the Goldberg conjecture, whatever it is going to entail certain things.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so if you already have in mind an answer to those entailments, then you would just be implicitly denying the Goldberg conjecture before you even knew what it is. Okay?
Why?
That's the first thing. The second thing...
No, you wouldn't be. You wouldn't know one way or the other.
Thing is that when we're talking about a metaphysical framework, we're talking about answers to certain questions. Okay?
Special questions, JRobin?
Now, everyone has an answer to these questions that they're predicating. You are predicating.
That's an interesting claim. Everyone has an answer to these questions that they're predicating. Really? Even the implicit questions that arise from me making statements.
Okay? Because what it means to predicate is that you're actually invoking a reference point for states of affairs, the truths of the propositions that invoke them, right? You're talking about all of these concepts. You're talking about all of these things like relationships, possibilities, necessities. That's what you're talking about when you're invoking propositions and when you're thinking and when you're weighing certain outcomes in your head and making judgments about things. You're doing this every day, all the time. You're doing it right now, okay? If you're doing that, then you're going to be invoking a metaphysic. Okay, you're going to be invoking a model of reality under which those things will be intelligible, under which those things will be meaningful. Now, the answer to those questions will either be that there is an ultimate mind or that there isn't an ultimate mind, whatever that thing
Why?
you have is. Okay? The bottom line is those are the only two answers to the question.
This collapses
So
objection.
So which of the two positions are you in here? Is it an ultimate mind that you believe is that, or is it not the case?
No, I don't know. I mean,
What do you mean you don't know? You told me you have a position. You told me you have a position.
Listen, look, I have no interest.
In the confines of the question you're asking, JRobin, you ding dong, he wouldn't know. You're saying it's either this or it's not, or it's the absence of that. He doesn't know. There's nothing wrong with that answer.
Okay, so what is it? What is it that's ultimate then? If that doesn't entail that either of these are the case. What is it that's ultimate?
Just listen to what I'm trying to say.
Hey, come on.
JRobin, just listen to what I'm trying to say. What you just said is something that 40 minutes ago you rejected. So what you just said was, look, these are the only two options. It's a disjunction. It's exhaustive. Therefore, there can't be a middle position. You did just do that.
Okay. Yep. What is your ultimate framework? What is your metaphysics?
Does JRobin acknowledge that he contradicted himself right there? No. He doesn't even realize that he backed away from that when Roger brought that up, and it was 30 or 40 minutes ago. It was towards the beginning of this particular coverage, but I think we were about halfway through, 30 minutes into this, and that's when nope, I'm not saying that. And now he's right back to saying that.
Physical framework.
Okay, so you're not going to respond to him. Jeff, is there a point?
Nope.
Roger, what is your metaphysical framework?
Different Jeff. Sorry.
Roger, are you done for the day?
No, I mean, if he's not going to answer what I'm going to be saying, and he's just going to go back to his script.
Because I asked you a question, you didn't answer it. You wanted to ask me questions, so I'm actually waiting for the answer to my question.
Why should he, JRobin? You've already affirmed that you can't be trusted.
What is your metaphysical framework?
I'm a Platonist.
That doesn't entail either of these things.
I'm a Platonist.
Okay, does that answer the question as to what the fundamental nature of truth and reality are?
It might.
To me, it does, yeah.
Okay, so then, are these things that you believe answer the question as to the nature of truth? Is that a mind? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, good. Then you do have access to it. So you're not. So you deny God.
But Platonism could also. Platonism could, in theory, be consistent with theism as well.
Then it's not an answer to what the nature of truth is. Then, as I'm
Why?
talking about it, because we're talking about the foundational nature of what it means for things to be actual. Okay, what it means for things to be intelligible.
And Platonism would account for that.
What the fundamental nature of correlativity and possibility and impossibility are. This is why every single time you try to bring up Platonism, I mentioned that it's not a metaphysic in the context of as we're describing it here.
Okay.
It is. You're just rejecting it because, for whatever reason, you think that Platonism entails the non-existence of a god. It just entails the non-existence of the God as you defined it before, which this is more of JRobin just insisting that you have to conclude that he has an exhaustive dichotomy. You have to pick one of those disjuncts: his God or the absence of any God.
If you think that Platonism isn't a metaphysic,
so what is it? So what is it?
I don't know
what is?
I may not be getting that disjunct right, but it seems to imply that, right? It's either God or not God, right? But when JRobin gets into these discussions later on, it seems apparent to me that what he's actually talking about is like, well, Platonism won't save you, Roger, because it's not a sufficient substitute for what I'm talking about. It has to be a worldview that has an ultimate being who is conscious and personality. And if it's not that, then it might as well be nothing. Which is a weird, to me, that's a weird stance to take.
Is it? I told you, and not as it's being defined here. If you're gonna pretend like you're just gonna play dumb here, right? Like you don't understand, like you have amnesia as to what I said. Like every time
Believe
it's being
me, I
brought
remember
up.
what you said more than you.
Okay, good. Then stop pretending like.
Said.
Then stop playing dumb. Then stop playing dumb. All right. Then stop playing dumb.
I'm not playing
so
dumb.
I made it clear that wouldn't be in the.
And JRobin is yelling again and over talking people. I'm just going to increase the volume of my voice so that I appear more correct, when in fact you just sound like more of a jackass, JRobin.
Context of metaphysics.
That's what the J stands for in JRobin.
Jay, you're yelling. You're raising your voice.
Okay.
You're over talking.
I'd like to ask Roger a question here.
Jay,
okay. So Roger, what is your?
I would like to ask Roger a question. JRobin has been asking him nothing but questions for this entire day. At this point, like for most of their waking conscious existence in this particular day, has been JRobin attempting to hungrily, eagerly, sexually. Sorry, interrogate Roger and prove that Roger he's not up to snuff. Right? JRobin's gonna beat this big bad master's student in philosophy and he's gonna do it with the power of Christ. Pathetic. It's pathetic.
What is your metaphysical framework? You say you have one, which means you have access to it, of course, mentally. So what is your metaphysical framework here?
It's a very complicated question, but
so hang on, Roger. It's been a long day. I know Jay wants to continue to press. Are you ready to move on from this conversation? Because you seem frustrated and tired. Jay seems frustrated and tired. I'm giving you both the option.
Can I do something spicy? I want to put it to a vote by people raising their hands in the audience. If you think that my arguments were more successful, you could raise your hand, and if you think that his arguments were more successful, you could not raise your hand. I'm just curious what people think.
Oh, holy shit! I mean,
no. I got plenty of disagreement. No worries.
Okay. So, what is your metaphysic?
No, look at that. Oh. Okay.
All right. So, what is your metaphysic?
That's a majority. Yay. Okay. All right. I'm fine. As long as people think that. Okay. Yeah. What's my metaphysic? Platonism.
Okay. Is that an answer to the?
Do you think some philosopher will be able to tell me how this particular brand of precept is kind of dishonest sophistry? Because and JRobin has already kind of demonstrated that by he said that he wasn't trying to commit respondents to one or the other disjunct in his little dichotomy, and then turned around 30, 40 minutes later and and Roger was following along with the script, and then held Roger to that exact commitment. So, yeah, it's either dishonest or it's incompetent. Now, it can be both.
Fundamental nature of reality, as it's been
Yes.
as I've
Yes.
described it. Okay,
Yes.
does Platonism have a mind as that which is ultimate?
If you're a divine conceptualist Platonist, then yes.
Okay, so Platonism ipso facto does not have anything to do with whether or not a mind is real or not?
Platonism is a particular position about abstract objects. You can either think
so then it's not an answer to the question. So what is it in your worldview that is foundational and fundamental, okay, that will be the basis by which anything is, can be, cannot be? What is it?
Abstract objects.
Okay, didn't we go over this in the last conversation?
Yeah, but you.
Okay, well, our abstract, well, granting that silly statement anyways, are abstract objects, is God an abstract object?
No, he's concrete.
Good. So then what you believe as foundational and fundamental would then negate God, correct?
Hang on. Someone, apparently, they're requesting I bring them up. Yeah, so...
so you, by virtue of your position, deny the existence of God, correct? So you're not neutral.
I don't really think I do deny the existence of God. I'm open to God.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. No.
Yeah, see, that's the problem, JRobin, because in Roger's case, he's probably he might deny the position, he might deny the existence of the God as you've defined it, but that wouldn't necessarily mean he's denying the existence of any other gods. I mean, so he and this is sort of the weird issue, like I guess that just makes him a local atheist. Which JRobin has admitted, maybe not JRobin, maybe it was Darth Dawkins. I think it was JRobin. He's admitted that he's a local atheist. He doesn't believe in Allah. He doesn't believe in the Hindu god, the Hindu pantheon. So, he's a local atheist with that respect as well. He believes in his God as defined in Christianity. Probably take issues with the way God is defined slightly differently in Judaism, because obviously they don't hold to the reality, what the Christians believe is the reality of the resurrected Messiah. So yeah, I think this is when things get really bad in terms of the discussions, because then you end up kind of confined to these weird. If you wanted to confine yourself to these kind of binary philosophical thought experiment kind of things, and then jump back into a person's belief stance, which is going to involve a little bit of their own psychological stances, skipping back and forth to that I think becomes not only counterintuitive, but it becomes counterproductive, especially when one person, JRobin, wants to hold somebody, browbeat somebody with the structure of what they think is the validity of a particular argument, as if that should be informing that person's psychological stance, and it might not be convincing. And now he's in a position where he's talking with somebody who is trained in philosophy, Roger, who is attempting to hold him to the structure of that argument, and JRobin is running from that structure, and then then keeps winding the questions back to, I want to talk about Roger's belief stances. I want to talk about what he thinks he's affirming with his metaphysic. Okay, the discussion was supposed to be about whether or not your argument, JRobin, really does show either the impossibility or incoherency of a neutral position towards your God, which you called agnosticism. And your argument doesn't demonstrate that, and this guy was walking you through it. Roger was walking you through that, and JRobin has essentially rejected any of these kinds of criticisms, so I guess he's just going to continue to run with that same sad argument.
No, listen, being neutral and being open to God's existence are two different things, okay? You can hold to a position that the grass is green, but be open that it's a different color. That doesn't mean you don't have a position. So having a position and being open to a different position is two wildly different things here, okay? So your position is that God does not exist. That is your position, and that has been made clear for the umpteenth time to everyone in the room, okay? And that neutrality towards God, because whatever the answer to that question is, they're going to have access to whether or not, or to what it is, right? If they have an answer to that question, either that thing is a foundational mind or it's not, okay? Now, your position is that it's not a mind. So that means you deny God. That's the end of that conversation, really. You deny God's existence. Yes, it is. We've had a conclusion now.
Okay, we'll let it be the end of that conversation.
Yeah,
Rico,
this is just
welcome up to the
not
room. What have you got for us, Rico?
Well, I just want to understand neutrality just means that someone suspends belief about whether or not God exists, right? So your argument has to be that someone can't suspend belief about whether or not God exists. So I would like to know the inference rules. And
we already understand that. We already understood. We already went over this.
Well, it should be very simple for you to give me the argument.
We already went over this, Rico. Did you not understand what was said here earlier?
Well, what's the first premise?
Okay, what did I say, Rico?
I don't know. What's the first premise of your argument? Tell me.
Well then, if you weren't listening, then that's not. I'm not going to be interested. I'm not interested in.
Well, is it a simple argument or not? Do you even know?
You're another one of the thugs. Okay, that I always talk about. You're another one of Jack Antrax's goons.
What's the form of the argument?
I'm not interested in speaking with you. Okay.
Okay, Roger. Do you know the form of the argument?
JRobin's argument.
So Roger, is that all that you wanted to say? Now that we understand that you deny the existence of God, is everything else clear?
You could just
before we get on to that. Hold on, before we get on to that. Wait, before we get on to that, I just want to figure out.
Roger, I didn't hear an answer to that question.
But I asked Roger.
Can you please, Roger? I can't hear you.
Question. So.
Well, Roger, if you don't say anything now, just assume that we're done with the conversation.
I asked Roger a question, right? My question was if he understood.
We're done with the conversation. Okay.
Jesus Christ, JRobin. I mean, fucking flail around much?
That's fine.
If he knew what the form of the argument was that JRobin gave that says that someone can't suspend belief that God exists.
It's modus
ponens. So what's the first premise of his argument?
Oh wow, he's gone. Okay. The first premise of his argument.
Of course, he runs because the first time.
Okay, sorry. Like my social battery is going very low, and I just, I want to say some things. Look, I hope that I was getting a little bit enervated because I just felt like I was being badgered constantly, which just like threw me off a little bit. But I hope that I was nonetheless making coherent points. I mean, it's difficult to sometimes talk when you're being yelled over perpetually. So
it's called
yeah,
a kill screen because basically there's no way to finish the level. That some sort of random data or code inside the program ends up getting used for what you see on the screen.
So there is no God because there is no God because there is no God because there is no God because.
Guys.
All right. So yeah, that pretty much covers it for that one. I wanted to wrap that one up. There's been a pretty decent conversation going on in there in the live chat. Scott Terry was asking about presuppositionalism. I don't know that presuppositionalism is by default automatically fallacious, but I mean, it's not. Presuppositionalism is an apologetic, so it's in the theological camp, and some of the things that it assumes, I think, automatically, there's a lot of question begging, I think, just implied from it. They're just entailed within its structure. I think that there's a problem with trying to say like, well, what's wrong with transcendental reasoning? Well, the precept apologetic has, depending on who you're working with, has baggage that's unique to itself, especially once you get into Bonson territory. That is separate from, sort of the issues that might arise with just transcendental arguments. But yeah, I mean, transcendental arguments could be made regardless of one is a Christian or a believer of any kind. But yeah, I think precept is taken too seriously by a lot of believers, as if it's a kind of robust philosophical position, and it's not. It is an apologetic. It was kind of. I mean, it's not to say that Van Til didn't have some kind of background in philosophy. He did, but presuppositional apologetics as that kind of school of thought, I don't know, is really dealt with directly by a lot of philosophers. Specifically, you might have guys like Planting and stuff taking on issues like problems of evil or the nature of God, divine simplicity, those kinds of things. And some of that stuff gets worked, depending on who you're talking to, they'll try to incorporate different arguments into that. But I don't know how seriously precept as an apologetic is taken within the discipline of philosophy in general, especially if it's like analytical philosophy. I think they'd probably have issues with it. If you're dealing with people who are in the philosophy of religion, I don't know, maybe they address it a little bit better. But there, a lot of the philosophers of religion that I tend to read, like Schellenberg or something like that, there's implications to the work that they do that would probably blow the hair back of most presupper. They'd just reject it automatically. Yeah, Tangela, you can start with the no God proposition, but when you have no causal mechanism, you run soon into problems. Yeah, but the problem is that what's treated in the case of JRobin is arguing is that, okay, well, you either have God as a causal mechanism or there's nothing else that serves as a causal mechanism. Any other thing is rejected out of hand. And then the philosophical argument that's usually presented to non-believers is it's either God as the causal mechanism or it's an absence of any causal mechanism at all. That's ultimately what they're left with. And that might not be the position of the non-believer. They could believe in a causal mechanism that was something else. This is usually when like a pantheist shows up and frustrates the hell out of them. But in my experience, if a pantheist shows up, they're just considered to be trolls and then dismissed from the conversation very quickly. So I don't really think that gets anybody anywhere. What if presuppositionalism is in the Kama Sutra? I don't think so. It's just not sexy enough. Anyway, I am going to wrap it up here. We're at the 2 hour and 10 minute mark. I would open this up, but I have got to get going. Apologies again for the super long rambly one, but I did want to get through this one. I'm hoping to start doing some shorter videos a little bit more regularly throughout the week. That's been kind of my goal, but I keep getting wrapped up into ones that have pretty heated debates like this one where there's quite a bit to cover. So, but anyway, thank you everybody for showing up. Thank you everybody in the live chat for what is always a lively, interesting, funny live chat experience. I hope you all have a great day. If your day is wrapping up, I hope it was good. Otherwise, I will be back. I don't know when I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be busy next week, so I might get one more live stream in. Not next Monday, but the following Monday, May 2nd. We will be setting up. It'll be the first time I've hosted a debate. It's going to be between Mr. Deliciou, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Anyway, Your Way, Yahweh, or the Highway, Fire of God. He's got a lot of different names. He is going to be debating Michael from the Canadian Atheist podcast on, I believe, either the moral superiority of Christianity or just whether or not Christian morality is true or something like that. So anyway, I'm going to be moderating that probably, like I said, Monday, May 2nd, 7:30 p.m. So if you're interested in that, tune in. I don't often, I've never actually moderated a debate, and I don't really engage in them much anymore, but we'll see. Should be entertaining. We'll probably keep it to an hour and a half, depending on how many questions come in. We're still working out the details of the structure of the argument and whether or not there's going to be a Q&A session. So, but yeah, keep an eye out for that. Hopefully I will get another stream in here. There's been a lot of stuff lately from Darth that Tom has dropped and Daz from Clubhouse Debates and on their Capturing Debates joint channel. So I'll probably try to get into a few of those a little bit later. So anyway, everyone, take care of yourselves. Have a great weekend. Be kind to each other. Unless you're dealing with a really harsh, nasty presuppositionalist, and then give it right back to them in kind. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.